Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I'm doing another video response. I just did one, but this is yet another for a different YouTuber that I'm subscribed to. This one goes out to Dave, also known as lawnboyspost1975. A few days ago, Dave posted a question that made me think. There are certain terms that we use in the gaming landscape, there are certain names that we see written down on paper that we pronounce differently from the way other people pronounce it or refer to things. For example, the Nintendo Entertainment System, some people shorten that to NES, like myself, but some people even abbreviate that shorter to just NES. And its sequel console, some people refer to that as the Super NES, like me. Some people just call it the SNES, and some people just refer to it as the SNES. And then Dave went into further unusual territory with the company Sega, which we all know, it's been around forever. In most parts, like in the West, we mostly refer to that company as Sega to rhyme with Mega or Vega. And Dave was saying if you do a search online for like Australian Sega Mega Drive commercials or anything like that, you'll see that in that part of the world, they actually referred to that company as Sega, which struck me as strange. It's like, Sega? That just doesn't sound right to me. And there are other examples of that in gaming, and actually outside of gaming, that kind of expand to other things, other parts of life. And one of those other things in life kind of came to bite me in the behind a little while ago, a couple years ago, so I thought I'd combine my video response to Dave along with just a general discussion here. Now, one of the examples that Dave gave has to do with the final console released by Atari. And the name of that, well, here's the actual console and its box and its controller and its actual console itself. That one Dave refers to as the Atari Jaguar. And I also, as a kid, referred to the large cat as a jaguar. In fact, if I was in a zoo, I would say, let's go look at the jaguar. But in North America, for some reason, we've slowly began to adopt a different way of saying that word, and most people refer to the cat as a jaguar, or the car. It's a jaguar. And that bled over into gaming to refer to the Atari Jaguar. And now I'm finding myself, even though as a kid I referred to the animal and the car as a jaguar, I'm now saying the Atari Jaguar. And I've been influenced by the way other people say stuff. It's a little bit of a strange one. And here is another example. There is a classic coin-operated shooter that everybody loves, myself included, that's been around for ages. And I was surprised to find out different people have different ways of pronouncing it. Here's the name of the game, and everybody is immediately going to know that game, and they're all going to instantly jump to how they think it should be pronounced. But I've heard it two different ways. For myself personally, I call it Galaga, as per, galaxy. And what's unusual is that it's actually a sequel to a game that came out before, which is also awesome, I really, really love it, called Galaxian. And I've heard some people refer to this sequel as Galaga, kind of rhyming with Galaxian, Galaga. But that doesn't sit right with me. It's like, no, it's Galaga. And yet, ironically, I don't refer to the first game as Galaxian. Like, it's weird that I've got it in my head. It's Galaxian and Galaga. It's not Galaxian and Galaga. It's an unusual one. It comes up every once in a while. I've heard some people refer to Galaga, and I'm like, no, that's not how you pronounce that name of that game. And here's a question for some of the other UK viewers and people who are watching this. I was listening to a podcast, Retro Gaming Roundup, where it's got a couple of American hosts, and it's also got UK Mike, who's a great guy. I've met him myself in person. And they were talking about an early release of a game. It was still in its early kind of stages of testing. It's not ready for being released yet. And Mike used this word here to describe that kind of release. And the American co-hosts started laughing because Mike said this word is pronounced beta. And they all thought that was absolutely hilarious. And I remember thinking, no, that's a British thing that in the UK they refer to that word as beta, even though for us in North America it's beta. I suppose in a way it's sort of similar to data or data. It's just an unusual word that we just pronounce differently or whatever. So yeah, do you guys say beta or beta? I say beta. Now, to take this discussion outside of gaming and instead kind of move into an area that, as I mentioned before, has kind of bitten me in the behind. When I was very young, I remember thinking to myself, obviously you always pronounce every word or every name of something the way the locals would. And I used to, when I would watch television, I would say, oh yeah, that country that's south of the United States, that's called Mexico. But nobody, except for people who live there, call it Mexico. Everybody says Mexico. And I eventually adopted that as like, okay, that's how we pronounce it. There's a chain of tropical islands to the west of the United States. And watching the 5-0 TV show in the 70s, I of course referred to it as Hawaii. Nobody calls it that. They all say Hawaii, like there's a Y in there. And I thought, oh, okay, so the fact that the locals say Hawaii or Mexico, I should actually adopt the other way of pronouncing it. It's Mexico and Hawaii. All right, whatever. Now, this is something we'll get back to place names in a second, but this is actually something that I touched on a little while ago, a couple of years ago now that I think about it. There's a series of books that I really love. Retief. These are written in the 50s, I think it was. Keith Laumer, loved this series of books. And in the story, Retief himself is holding or strangling the little eye stalks of the bad guy aliens. I mean, they're not really that mean or anything. They're just more greedy little guys. In the book, these creatures are spelled, or the name of their race is spelled like this. How would you pronounce that? Now, it's an alien word, so it would immediately just be like whatever way it came in my head, that's how I would then, from then on, always pronounce it. And I thought, okay, I'm thinking that's Groachi? Maybe these guys are Italian somehow? Yeah, they're the Groachi. And they just always remained Groachi in my head. But there was one, not this particular book, but there was another one where Retief goes and he meets up with some other aliens who refer to these little green guys. And they, because the Groachi that I call them have got like 5 eyes on stalks and they're obnoxious little fellas, this other alien that Retief was talking to had a nickname of them of the gross eyes. And I thought, oh yeah, because they've got eye stalks and they're kind of gross little fellows. They're the gross eyes. And I thought, wait a minute. Is that how you're is that the correct way to pronounce that word? Is it actually grossi, grossi, grossi? I've been pronouncing it Groachi all this time. That kind of took me for a little bit of a loop. I had to think about that. So there's another example of like you go into something, especially when it comes to alien names that don't really exist in real life. You've got to like wrap your head around, well, how do you say that word? Perfect example is actually from Star Wars. There is a few times that the planet that Chewbacca comes from has been brought up. There was the very, very regrettable Star Wars Christmas special where we actually went to his planet and it was all tropical and full of huts up in trees and all that kind of thing. We won't really talk too much about that. We also visited that planet in Episode 3, Attack of the Clones. Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. We actually go to the home planet of the Wookiees, and there's a battle that takes place. Yoda's there, and he actually meets up with Chewbacca. And the very first time I heard the name of the planet, now, I'm going to spell it here. Yeah, that's how it has always been spelled, and I remember encountering that in various comic books and stories. I read the Han Solo, there was a trilogy of books of his and Chewbacca going and doing adventures on their own, separate from the Star Wars saga. And sometimes they talk about Chewie's home planet, and this word would appear. How the heck do you pronounce that? So I thought, well, Kashi is like 3 Y's there. What would that be? Kashi Yik? Kashi Yik. I guess that, yeah, Kashi Yik. That's how it was in my head. I always adopted, or anytime I saw that word, I thought, Kashyyyk, the planet of the Wookiees. Okay, that makes sense. But then, in Revenge of the Sith, Mace Windu actually talks about how they're going to send troops to Kashyyyk. And I thought, Kashyyyk? You mean all those Y's are just like an E sound? Kashyyyk. Okay, I had to wrap my head around that. All right, it's actually called Kashyyyk. Now, there's another planet that actually, I'm gonna save it because it actually resolves or concludes my entire point. A couple of years ago, I did a video about Deckard and Blade Runner, and I called it "Deckard's Not a Replicant, I'm a Moron." I will put a link below to that because it's a video that gets a lot of views and a lot of people have a lot of very different opinions about it. My perspective is that Deckard was not intended to be a replicant, and I don't know why people think he is. And I just did it again. A lot of people in comments on that video have mentioned, you know, you're pronouncing that word wrong. It's not replicant, it's replicant. And I don't know why. Well, actually, I do know why. It's another one of those things, like Kashyyyk and like the Grawachi. When I was watching Blade Runner and the opening scroll goes up, and it mentions these people, these androids, were called replicants. The first time I saw that word, I couldn't grasp, how do you say that? Replicant? Republicant? I didn't know, you know, just a kid trying to quickly read a bunch of text. This word that isn't actually a word struck me. And for whatever reason, it got stuck in my head, like Grawachi, like Kashyyyk, that it's actually replicant. And I know why I did that. And I mean, even in the show, Deckard himself and Bryant and various other people, they always refer to them as replicants. It's not replicant. But everybody in the comments of my video keeps saying it's not replicant, it's replicant. And I have said replicant in that video. And I'm kind of apologizing for it because that's what was stuck in my head. And I think the reason why that was stuck in my head, just before the movie came out, or not just before, many years before Blade Runner was released in the theaters, my friend and I were very big into playing with space toys, and there was a series that came out in the 70s called Micronauts. They were this unusual series of action figures where you could swap out different pieces, and they would be android spacemen. I don't really know the right way to describe them, but anyway, that was the Micronauts. For whatever reason, I'm reading the opening text scroll for Blade Runner and I see replicant. For whatever reason, Micronaut and replicant, those two words stuck themselves in my head, and then I've always just referred to Deckard as a replicant, even though it's a replicant or replicant. And people have corrected me a lot of times in the video. Replicant is something that I just have a hard time wrapping my head around. I keep wanting to say replicant. So, my apologies to those of you who are constantly correcting me on that. It's in there. I can't get it out. Okay, final point, and I'm going to go back to the alien planet thing for my conclusion here, because it kind of wraps this whole conversation up nicely. When I was a kid, my friend who played with the Micronauts toys with me, he was also very much into space and astronomy and stuff. And we would get talking about Saturn and Mars and all that kind of stuff, and Jupiter, and some of the moons of Jupiter. And here they are, or at least here's the 4 biggies. We all know Ganymede and Callisto and Europa, and there's that other one which has a very short name. Now, how do you think that is pronounced? I, like many, pronounce it as Io, because that's a really short word. How else would you pronounce it? It's got to be Io. And I was very relieved when I was watching Cosmos with Carl Sagan in 1980. He himself referred to that moon as Io. And I think, okay, if Carl Sagan says Io, that's got to be the right way. My friend, for whatever reason, decided to correct me. He was like, you know, technically speaking, it's named after a Greek god, I think of romance or something. So the Greeks themselves would not say Io, they would say Io. And for some reason, that just didn't sit right with me. Again, we're going back to the grow size in the Retief books, or Kashyyyk in Revenge of the Sith. I'm just like, EO? Well, that can't be right. No, it's IO. And I'm gonna, I guess, well, there's a fellow I subscribe to. I hope he sees this, Galacticus X. He's from Greece. Please, let me know. Is the correct Greek way to say the name of that moon, is that actually Io? Or is my friend wrong? Because I'd like to say he was wrong. And I think Carl Sagan's got it right. So you know what? I'm going to stick with the way Carl Sagan says Io, and I'm going to stick with Mexico, and I'm going to stick with Hawaii, and darn it, I'm going to keep calling it Replicant, because that's in my head, and I just can't shake it. So there we go. Well, I've kind of gone way beyond Lawn Boy's comment or question there, so I just thought I'd wrap this entire conversation up. It is very interesting how we have in our heads the way to pronounce things that are sometimes completely different from the way it should be said, or the way the locals say it, or whatever is the correct way to say it. I just find it fascinating. And so, yes, thanks to Lawn Boy for kind of bringing this up as a subject. It's really made me think a lot of stuff. Anyway, yeah, there we go. I guess until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.